Good afternoon and welcome to today's Adweek webinar, Driving Success on YouTube for Food and Beverage Advertisers, where we'll be talking about key trends and best practices in the space. Today's webinar is sponsored by Pixability. I'm Danielle Moore, Senior Manager of Webinars here at Adweek's Content Studio, and I'll be your host today. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to make sure everyone knows what to expect from today's webinar and is familiar with the features of our platform. The actual presentation should go somewhere in the 30 to 35-minute range, after which we'll have time for audience Q&A. So if at any point you have a question for our speakers, just use the Q&A tool beneath the video window on your screen, and we'll get to as many questions as we can after the end of the presentation. Also, it's not too late to invite your colleagues to join us at today's webinar. About 15 minutes ago, you received a final reminder email from us. In there, you'll find a link to the webinar registration page that you can share with your colleagues. There's still plenty of time for them to join us live, but if they can't, today's webinar is being recorded, and they can always catch the on-demand version. In fact, that on-demand version will be available to all registrants, and we'll be sending you a link to that later today when it's live, around 3:30 Eastern, so keep an eye out for that. As for today's slide deck, while it is not available to download, you can feel free to reach out to Pixability's Matt Duffy directly with any questions that don't get answered today. We'll share that info as well a little later in the presentation. As always, if you enjoyed today's webinar, definitely check out the full Adweek webinars calendar at adweek.com/webinars. You'll see what we have coming up and also get access to our archive of on-demand webinars. Now, let me introduce you to today's speakers. We're happy to be joined by Max Levitin. Max is currently the measurement and analytics lead for the food, beverage, and restaurant industry at Google. He's worked at Google for nearly 4 years, previously supporting telecom. We're also very happy to welcome Tiffany Comiskey. Tiffany oversees strategy for the food, beverage, and restaurants category at Google. She has worked at Google for nearly 14 years with previous roles in performance and brand ad sales. We're also very pleased to be joined by Jessica Goon. Jessica leads Spring Foods growth strategy. Previously, she was VP of Digital Marketing and Consumer Experience at Kind Snacks, where she oversaw digital and omnichannel marketing, media, content, and social media. Next up, we'd like to welcome Kaylin Asher. Kaylin focuses on helping clients get the most out of their media spend through data-driven research and strategic solutions that have propelled many Texas-based and national brands, including many brands in the food and beverage industry. And finally, we're pleased to welcome back Matt Duffy. Matt leads marketing strategy for YouTube software and insights company, Pixability, our sponsor today, which is the only company certified by the YouTube measurement program for both brand suitability/contextual targeting and YouTube content insights. We've got some fabulous content and very appetizing content, I may say, to dive into today. So let me bring our speakers up on screen to get us started.
Just cut out. Okay, so again, just a quick intro to Pixability. We're a software and insights company working with agencies and brands to help them maximize suitability and performance on YouTube and connected TV. But let's get right to it. We're talking about the food and beverage space on YouTube today, a space that we work with a lot of brands and agencies in this space. For the purpose of defining what we mean by that today, CPG is one of the categories, alcohol brands is another, and restaurant is the third. We will talk about some insights today that relate just to CPG, and I'll point those out when we do. But for the most part, this is the overall food and beverage space that we're talking about today. So how big is this space on YouTube? It happens to be the 5th biggest space content-wise on YouTube. I know a lot of people think of, there's a lot of music content on YouTube, a lot of sports content, et cetera. Food happens to be a huge space and growing. And again, it's any content related to those 3 categories that we talked about. Now, what makes up the sources of those content? Well, most people won't be surprised that it's mostly creators. In fact, if you look at, we did something recently where we looked at the top videos on YouTube in the food space, and over 90% of them were by creators. So here are just a sampling. It's just a sampling from us of some creators you may or may not know. Some of these are people that became famous outside of YouTube, like Gordon Ramsay, and others became famous through YouTube. I highlighted Mongchi here because she happens to be one of my favorites. For anyone who hasn't read Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner, it's a great book, and she's a huge fan of Mongchi, which is how I became a fan of Mongchi. And so the cool thing about YouTube, as we all know, is Mongchi, this is back in 2015, she became a YouTube star and she got her own first cookbook because of it. And what's great is, she doesn't have to go and get approval from a TV network in order to be out there and becoming famous. And she's now become super famous. So as an advertiser, how do I work on YouTube if it's sort of owned by creators, right? We're going to talk about this a little bit today. One of the things you can do is you can partner with creators. Another thing you can do is you can have ad creative that includes creators. We actually worked with a QSR brand years ago that did an amazing Super Bowl ad where they had hired a bunch of some of the top creators to be in the ad. And then you can do things, we'll talk about this later, but you can do things where your ad creative can actually look more like user-generated content, which we'll also talk about, which is just a nice way to have an effective ad on YouTube. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Max, who is going to share some really cool audience insights of what he's seeing in the space.
Yeah, so as you can see from the chart here, this is, and if you couldn't hear me before, this is looking at what people are searching for in YouTube to gain access to the kind of content that they're looking for. So here you can see that over the last 5 years, specifically from 2019 into 2020, videos about like cooking videos specifically really saw some tremendous growth and have stabilized at a significantly higher level than they were pre-COVID, sort of indicating that people are now turning to YouTube to look for various ways that they can cook. Go to the next slide. Similarly, we're seeing a consistent rise in videos around recipes. So to the same sort of token where people are turning to YouTube, not just to watch videos of other people cooking, but what are some recipes that they can cook at home. And over the last 2 quarters, we've seen a pretty steep rise. And something that we're thinking about is how is that going to be impacting the holiday season that's upcoming. Something that's interesting too, looking over the same period, and this is looking by week, comparing healthy content versus vegan. So we're talking about healthy versus healthful, where vegan seemed to have had its moment in mid to late 2021, but has sort of regressed to be more on par with the healthy content. So people are looking for more generic healthy videos rather than the specific sort of discipline that it would take to be properly vegan. And something else that's interesting is you can see at the start of every year, the healthy content sort of spikes around people are, making their New Year's resolutions and stuff.
Yeah. And Max, one thing I would add there, even just these past few years, I think one of the things to that point of the healthy, the new year, new me, what we're starting to see is just this concept of that wellness behavior, especially I think coming out of the pandemic, that wellness is a bigger part of everyone's lives every day. And while there's still that new year, new me spike that starts the year off every January, we see that the decline that comes after that January period is a little bit lower than it used to be. And there's a little bit more of an evergreen behavior now creeping throughout the years. So for brands that have a little bit more of a wellness message or a wellness value, know that this is a place where a lot of consumers are more thinking about that throughout the full year, as opposed to just that one time of the year where they're thinking about that new year, new me behavior.
Yeah, and you can actually see that point happening in real time where you look throughout the last 5 years, there's never been a spike mid-year, but in 2022, in like June, you can see that queries for the healthy category are starting to increase once again. This one I think is also pretty interesting, that demand for the restaurant as a category, so not just the sort of at-home cooking or recipes, people are looking to YouTube for restaurant content as well. And that's seen a significant increase throughout 2022. I know, like personally, having watched The Bear on Hulu, I'm like very interested in what's going on in the restaurants. So I think that that's maybe I'm contributing some part of this, but it's another interesting trend that we're seeing across the food and beverage space. And then finally, this one I also can relate to, that so far in 2022 compared to 2021, searches on YouTube for happy hour content are up 25%. It's regressed a little bit, but I think that this sort of goes to the same point of, people are kind of coming out of COVID. They're looking to hang out with their friends, but yet there's still sort of major economic issues. So looking for some deals. And happy hour is the kind of perfect blend of those two things. And we can see it reflected in what people are searching for on YouTube specifically.
And Max touched on it a little bit earlier, but obviously for cooking and recipes, there's a typical seasonal increase as you head into the holiday season. I think for our restaurant brands, especially in light of the current economic climate, topics like happy hour are helpful to keep in mind, especially headed into that holiday period where people are seeking those opportunities to spend time together with their coworkers outside the office. And this is a great way to sort of spread that message of whatever value you might be able to provide to consumers during this current economic period. So. And one thing I'd also add to a lot of the trends that Max just shared are actually pulled from our Google Trends tool. So for any marketers that are looking to kind of explore some of these trends yourself, that's an externally available tool if you've not used it. And you can explore beyond just these insights as well to better understand trends that might be impacting your specific categories too.
That's great. And Tiffany, I'll just add for anyone on the line that wants to go beyond sort of the Google Trends analysis, Tiffany and Max have just a treasure trove of insights on what's happening on YouTube in the food space. We do as well at Pixability. My email will be at the end of this, so you can email me and I can put you in touch with Max or Tiffany or help you out if Pixability can help you out with that. So these are just some interesting kind of top of the mind trends we wanted to share with you all. So what does this mean for advertisers? Most of the folks on the line right now are probably an agency or a brand trying to figure out what are the trends that will affect how I change my advertising right now. And, you saw the trend towards people searching for cooking and recipes. So recipe related creative might be something you think about. Some of you may be at agencies where you're not the creative team, you might be the media buying team and you're kind of frustrated with the creative, but these are things that can help you. And I'm very excited to have two folks here now to talk to about this. We'll start with Jess Goon, and she, as Danielle introduced her, she has tons of experience in the food space, and I'll let her talk about her experiences with YouTube.
Thanks, Matt. So I've actually worked with Pixability across, I think, 3 different companies now, 3 different brands. So a lot of experience with the team. And, it was really, really great from a partnership standpoint at Kind was, I think, leaning into YouTube and the differentiation with YouTube. So a lot of those trends are really about thinking channel first. Right. So the starting point as an advertiser is you can't think of YouTube as TikTok or connected TV or a TV commercial. Like, you will get the most out of YouTube when you lean into YouTube and everything that it has to offer. So what was really exciting to see happen over time at Kind was the ramp up and success over time by leaning into what makes YouTube unique. Right. And you can see this really amazing growth trajectory of the impressions for the brand and the VCR. And we've also looked at average view duration on how this can be a multifaceted channel to drive the entire consumer experience journey for the consumer. So a lot of ways that happened was you can see that sort of starting small, learning, and then doubling down on what worked. And that's really where Pixability helped us immensely. Some of the things that I love to share about this success is, year over year, looking at the full marketing mix for Kind, YouTube was the #1 return on investment for the entire marketing mix for the brand for Kind. So, that's really powerful. Like, more effective than TV, more effective than Instagram, more effective than any other channel at driving return on sales. And again, I really attribute that to the fact that Kind worked with Pixability to do exactly what was right just for YouTube and taking it out as a separate strategy. I think what's really exciting is you can see it work top funnel, mid funnel, bottom funnel, and that there are a lot of different levers you can pull to do that. So really exciting journey. And I know at Spring Foods, we're at the sort of start of this journey now and, doing it again. But it's been a really powerful tool to help grow the brand across the full funnel. Matt, anything you would add before I move on?
No, I think that's great. And thanks for the kudos, Jess. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about sort of, you said to think about YouTube as YouTube because it has very unique capabilities that you can't get from other platforms. But also the fact that the TV screen aspect of it has been something that's been effective for a lot of advertisers recently, and just talk to that a little bit.
Yeah. And look, I think this really changed over the last 5 years, right? So as consumer behavior migrated to multi-screen and, online linear video and maybe away from cable TV, we really at Kind saw a massive increase in TV screen advertising, particularly for Kind, right? So, what we ended up doing as we scaled this and as the consumer behavior changed was ultimately migrating a lot of what was online linear video advertising into YouTube because of the really unique targeting capabilities, full funnel capabilities, being able to serve somebody like really great content based on what they're watching, what they're searching for, and then being able to retarget them. I mean, it's just something you can't do in other platforms and channels. So this was, again, you see that data point there, the 40% increase in, TV screens, like that was in line with consumer behavior. So a lot of this is just being there and being ready as the consumer shifts, like watching it and then, being nimble, right? And moving that quickly as you see the results. So, this was something that was incredibly powerful for the brand over time, but was certainly enabled by, putting YouTube first, making YouTube a unique channel, not trying to sort of retrofit a larger marketing strategy into it, and then being nimble and scaling as you see results.
That's great. And I think we're seeing companies that do what you all did at Kind, Jess, where you kind of thought of YouTube as its own thing. We are seeing some that see it as one element of a CTV plan, but even those folks need to understand the unique capabilities, right? There are certain things you can measure and target on YouTube, to be able to serve ads on a TV screen based on what someone just searched for in Google is a very unique capability of YouTube that food brands we work with do all the time. They take their search strategies and they move it into YouTube, and it's super, super unique. So why is this happening? Like, why are TV screens, why is YouTube suddenly a TV player, right? Why are we seeing it at the upfronts? Why are we seeing it everywhere? Well, it's audience behavior where more and more people are watching YouTube videos on their TV screens. This data is Pixability data from a survey we did of consumers this year. And again, it's self-reported data. So this is not actual screen, measurement data of impressions, but of the adults we surveyed, over 80% said, yeah, I watch YouTube on my TV screen. Obviously, and not surprisingly, most of the heavy users of TV screens were Gen Z and millennials. And again, this is where we see the industry trying to figure out how does YouTube fit into a CTV plan. You can continue to run YouTube as just a digital platform where whatever screen it shows up on, and I don't care what screen it's on. Or you can do what a lot of our advertisers are doing. And I think, Tiffany, you've seen this as well, where they're specifically saying, I want to run some campaigns where we specifically target TV screens. We ran one outside the food space for Saucony, where they said, we want to just be on TV screens and see how that works, and do it across Roku and Amazon as well, and make some comparisons. So it's a really cool option for folks now. Tiffany, did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things too, where we're starting to drive increased scale, as well as through some of the options that are available through our DV360 capabilities where you're actually able to bring together your campaign targeting across a number of platforms, and that introduces opportunities for scale on YouTube too, as well as greater efficiencies, and in ways of how you can target frequency and different things like that. So, I think, Matt, to your point, there are a number of different ways to execute, and we're seeing a lot of success through a number of our brands in the food and beverage category. And like a funny little anecdote that we have, we also ran a study with Kantar, and they found that of the top activities that people do while watching ad-supported CTV, 2 of them are eating food or cooking and baking. So this is a great opportunity for brands to be in front of consumers in those moments that matter, because they're engaging in activities that are related to the brands that they're seeing on their TV screens. And so I think that this kind of gives that premiumness that a lot of brands in the food and beverage space are looking for, but offering unique reach and opportunity through the YouTube platform. And we can touch on that a little bit more later as well.
That's great. And with that, we'll introduce our other sort of voice from the advertiser side. We heard from a nice brand marketer voice, and now we'll talk to Kaylin Asher, who runs an agency and has had tons of food clients, other clients as well, but just a long list of food clients. So we thought we'd ask her to kind of comment on how YouTube has been a big part of campaigns that she's worked with, and what's worked and what hasn't.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. For sure, we have really used YouTube for most of our brands, our CPG brands, in the upper funnel area. A lot of our brands we're known for really launching brands and growing them or relaunching them. And so when ComScore came out about 4 years ago with the top streaming video platforms, we knew all the eyeballs, we're starting to wane from the linear TV space, and, to really get that third party to tell us where they're going. While Netflix might be, a top platform, it was an ad supported. So YouTube was the number 2 or number 1 place to go for ad supported TV eyeballs. And so for us, it became that next TV channel we needed to be on. And so we started pretty strong with all of our brands, including that. In some cases, some of our brands only go with streaming. And so we're on YouTube, we might be on Hulu. So it's really important to us to make sure that it's always part of the mix. And so some of the brands you see here, some JBS brands there, YouTube is part of our campaign, our strategy for every one of these brands right now, as we're trying to grow and launch them. So it's been very successful, and we tend to buy it on especially for these brands, we're buying on a video completion rate. And for us, we're seeing 70% numbers, which are great. It's above average. And then our bumpers are actually performing almost at the 90% rate. Their 6-second bumpers are doing really, really well. So for us, this has always been a continued success.
That's great. And we're going to talk about bumpers in a minute too, which are something that all advertising categories use, but happen to work extremely well for food brands, and definitely seen it with your brands, Kaylin, the JBS brands and so forth. Just to give another example from one of the campaigns Kaylin's teams run, I thought this was a good example of creative that works. This was an ad from Swift Meats, which is part of the JBS family of brands there. And just a couple of things why we use this as an example. First of all, it got extremely high conversion rate. But just some of the things they did, we're seeing ads that have sort of a real feel to them, like a real scene. You almost feel like you're in this person's kitchen watching them cook, as opposed to, a heavily produced video, which those can work well as well. But this sort of almost UGC feel of ads now we're seeing work really well in the food space. You saw Max talk about people looking for cooking and recipes. So, you have an ad like this where you see someone sprinkling some spices on a good looking steak and it's attractive, right? And then the Swift folks worked with Kaylin and us to do some sort of basic tactical things, but that do always work well with CTA extensions and companion banners and so forth. And having a nice mix of showing a human plus the actual product, the food, is always in any category is an important thing. Introducing the brand early. A lot of our friends from Google always point that out. When you're a TV advertiser in the old days, you'd wait to the end to sort of introduce the brand. And on YouTube, it's like, get that brand in there as soon as you can. So all just some good best practices from Swift here that we thought we'd share.
Yeah, I'd like to just kudos to Commerce House who created this. They've been the agency for Swift and Adaptable and some of the JBS brands for several years, and they've done a really good job honing in on these food shots and also customizing this to the platforms that we're on. So it's very inviting and makes you really want to engage with the product, and that's, I do think, why we're really getting a lot of that above benchmark results.
For sure. Great. Well, I'm going to share a few more insights. The next set of insights are really for the CPG space, which, as you've heard, Jess and Kaylin are both pretty focused on the CPG space. We have a lot of data on restaurants and alcohol as well, but these next few slides are just some best practices for advertisers that we've seen. This is data showing what types of IAB content categories of video on YouTube are a good place to be as an advertiser in food. And we showed earlier that the food space is huge on YouTube. So some food advertisers say, great, I just want to be in the food space on YouTube. Don't put me on music. Don't put me on pop culture. Don't put me on anything else. And we always push people that that's a mistake, because you can find your audience anywhere on YouTube. It's really a test and learn thing. This is just data showing that the content areas in yellow happen to perform well in this time frame. This is not to say only advertise in these areas in yellow. There are contextual targeting third parties out there that feel like they can predict ahead of time exactly what content area is going to work. And it varies by advertiser to advertiser, depending on your creative, what you're promoting, the time of year, and all those things. So it's really a test and learn thing. So the lesson here is just don't be so narrowly focused in contextual targeting that you only do one category or two categories. Find the categories that you're comfortable with and test and learn, basically. And then just in terms of ad units, Kaylin mentioned that bumpers worked really well for Swift and a few of our other advertisers. And it's kind of a tried and true tactic for all industries, but we have data that's showing that it actually has been performing even better for food advertisers than it has for across the rest of the industries. So as a food advertiser, if you're not testing bumpers, you should be. It's as you can see here, food advertisers have outperformed other advertisers in terms of VCR and conversion rates using bumpers. So it's a great tool to use. The other one that we suggest, I mean, there are a handful of these, but the other one that's sort of hot recently is this, relatively new unit of the vertical format, which works great for food advertisers. And we're seeing, in fact, what we've just seen the first half of the year has been outperforming all other ad units for food advertisers. So definitely something to try if you haven't. Some really good stuff there. We wanted to keep this nice and short. So there are lots of other tips that Tiffany and Max give clients and that we can give clients. Again, they're the insights arm of the food and beverage group at Google. We're an insights company and a campaign management company. So this is where we feel like we add the most value. So let's get it to Q&A, but first just leave you guys with some takeaways. So big takeaway, huge growth in food and beverage. It's the fifth biggest space on YouTube according to Pixability's data. Growing fast. Second thing, we showed some audience trends. Max showed some search trends, which again, Tiffany pointed out you can find yourself, but not everyone has the time to always be looking for search trends. So those are just some cool ones we thought we should share. Cooking, recipes, those sorts of trends are showing what audiences are doing on YouTube. The third thing is just we saw some good success stories from Kind and from the JBS brands. Just use some of what's worked for them as not as a template, but as a starting point to test things and see if it works for you. It won't work for everyone. Finally, targeting. I just mentioned contextual targeting. There's great behavioral targeting with YouTube, as Jess said. So to be too overly, I mean, we're a contextual targeting company, but we always say if you're overly focused on contextual and you're not leveraging the behavioral targeting, then you're missing the boat, especially as a food advertiser. And then finally, we shared a couple ad formats that happen to be performing really well that if you haven't tried, you should try. So with that, I mentioned that I'd leave my email. I can get you in touch with any of the people on this webinar if you have questions for any of us. I see a lot of questions coming in from you. A lot of them were, we can't hear Matt Duffy, so I really apologize for whatever technical difficulties happened at the front end of this. Thanks for staying with us. But with that, I will turn it over to Danielle, who can start to give us some of the questions from the audience.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those insights, Max, Tiffany, Matt, Jessica, Kaylin. Amazing troubleshooting. Again, our apologies to the audience for the tech difficulties that were happening at the top there. I was on the back end sounding the tech alarms and the speakers fixed it themselves. So thank you all for bearing with us. We do have time to take a few questions as Matt previewed, and we'll get to as many questions as we can over the next 5 to 10 minutes or so. If we don't get to your question, just know that we always make sure they get forwarded over to our sponsor so they have the opportunity to possibly reply offline. A few quick reminders though, today's webinar has been recorded and will be available on demand later this afternoon. We'll be emailing everyone a link to that recording, so keep an eye out for it. And you can feel free to reach out to Matt directly, as he said, with any questions about the presentation at mduffy@pixability.com. Check that out on the slide as well. So let's get to some questions without further ado. First question, and I'm going to direct this one to Tiffany to start. Are you seeing more food and beverage advertisers starting to use YouTube as a connected TV platform on your end?
Absolutely. I think Matt touched on it a bit earlier in terms of just the significant growth that we've seen on the platform as a part of our viewer watch time and different things like that. So it's definitely become a major part of YouTube's business. And just for clarity's sake, because I know that we have a lot of similar product names, YouTube TV is different than connected TV on YouTube. So for anyone in the audience that might be wondering what that difference is, connected TV on YouTube is specifically people who might choose to watch the YouTube platform. So YouTube main, as we typically refer to it. So they might choose to watch Hot Ones per se, or another channel or video, whatever they would like to watch on their connected TV devices. So any smart TV, or they might have a Roku or a Chromecast, any of those products that let you stream YouTube on your connected TV. So just for clarity's sake in terms of what that is. But we are seeing significant growth from that specific platform. I think years ago, we used to talk about how mobile was the main screen, and now we're actually starting to see that connected TV is more of that main screen for us. We just released a study in partnership with ComScore that spoke to the fact that one of the values that the platform has for YouTube is that it does provide a unique audience to beyond linear TV. So you get a little bit more reach beyond, especially for brands who are heavily invested in TV. Connected TV is a great complement to that, and is actually a great driver of incremental reach, as well as it offers a bit more efficiency in terms of the audience that you're targeting. So a couple of statistics that we released as a part of that study, 47% of target audiences see ads on YouTube via a connected TV. So that just kind of speaks to the volume of what that is delivering for brands on YouTube. And also 38% of YouTube audiences did not see the ad on linear TV. So that gives you sort of a sense of what the scale of the platform is and just what that opportunity is for brands.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you for that insight. Our next question, what are the ways you're seeing food advertisers drive conversions on YouTube? Matt, I'm going to throw that one to you first.
Yeah, different food advertisers have different KPIs, obviously, and some don't necessarily want conversions. They just want awareness. A lot of them are looking for store visits. So YouTube, we help advertisers. YouTube has some great ways to track store visits that are driven from YouTube campaigns. One of the other new tools that we didn't mention in the presentation that has been working well for conversion-focused food advertisers is video action campaigns, which is a new sort of ad type from Google that is basically set up to drive clicks and conversions. So that's something, again, to test if you are very conversions focused. So to answer the audience member's question, I would sort of, figure out, work with Google or your partner of what type of conversion is it that you want to drive. And then is VAC or video action campaigns a good way to try to do that? We always try that in conjunction with a few other techniques, and sometimes VAC works the best and sometimes another works the best, but it's been performing really well for certain food advertisers, so worth trying.
Got it. Very comprehensive answer. Thank you for that. Are there other interesting audience trends that you're seeing on YouTube right now? Max, I'm going to throw that one at you. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton. It's a really cool and interesting space to play around. And to Tiffany's point, playing around in Google Trends, you can change it to be web search or YouTube search to understand where people are searching for different things. One topic that kept popping up, which I think is really interesting, it's not something that I'm particularly interested in, but like food ASMR videos have been really popular over the last few years. And we were talking about this as we were putting this together. There's, I forget the content creator's name, who has like 15 million subscribers. It's like a huge area. So if that's something that you're interested in, or maybe you weren't 3 years ago, now you are, then you could sort of relate to this. Another topic that was popping up that I think is like double clicking into the recipes and cooking videos. Air fryers are really popular. So people are looking up content on YouTube related to air fryers, crock pots, any sort of at-home cooking implement that has sort of gained popularity over the last few years. People are like, okay, I got this thing. What do I do with it? People are turning to YouTube to learn and to become little home, easy cook experts.
Yeah, super interesting. So interesting to see the difference in uses and gratification there just between those two trends. Very cool to hear more about. Our next question, what kinds of tactics work well if you're a food brand with very close ties to a specific store or set of stores? Great question there. Matt, I'm going to throw that one to you.
Yeah, and Tiffany or anyone else, feel free to add in. We have a lot of advertisers who, Kroger is our most important partner, and we just want people to go to Kroger and buy our food in Kroger or whatever their food grocery partner might be. Our teams just recently have come up with some cool ways to deal with that situation, where you can kind of come up with good tactics and profiles for shoppers of a certain store like Kroger, and then the profile of the audience that the food brand is trying to reach. And you can do some nice Venn diagrams of figuring out where there's crossover and where you can try to reach them both. And so that's something that we've tried. I know, like I said, it's for a lot of food brands. They're not e-commerce brands. So they're not selling themselves. So driving people to the store is more important, and we can track store visits for them after doing tactics like I just talked about.
Got it. Cool. Good insights there.
And happy to expand on that too. One of we do a lot of work with obviously like restaurant brands as well, that are focused on trying to drive a lot of that store visit behavior. We've talked a lot publicly in terms of our release of the new Performance Max tools, one of which is focused on helping to drive in-store traffic and in-store visits. And so I think that that's a great way that we're trying to lean into that category and help to drive a little bit more of that behavior for a lot of those brands that might not necessarily offer an online e-commerce based behavior. That's one way to try to help drive some of that offline traffic.
Got it. Super interesting. Awesome. So our next question is for Jessica specifically. I appreciate this question a lot as a Kind Bar fan myself. So I'm very excited to hear your thoughts on this. The person asks, when you mentioned that for Kind, YouTube was the #1 platform for ROI, which is crazy. What metrics/measurement did you use to determine that YouTube was the specific driver of that ROI?
Yeah, and there's sort of two parts to this, and some of this is what Tiffany was saying, which is, there are small short-term ways to validate some of that return. So Kind's in, 400,000 stores in the US. Some way to look at impact is doing a smaller geo-targeted area with a specific set of stores. And then, something that Pixability helped us with is using affinity targeting for people who shop at Walmart, for example. And so if you can kind of zero in on an area and then target people who shop at Walmart and then look at the impact of that, I mean, that's a really powerful, small, short-term way to connect the dots to know you're making an impact. So that's some piece of it. Is there are iterative sort of in real-time ways you can track that measurement, which is really exciting. And then the #1 ROI metric I talked about, one was a marketing mix analysis. So we're looking, year over year in partnership with IRI and, YouTube, and pulling every data point in. And anyone who's gone through a marketing mix knows it's a really time-intensive process. But again, 3 years running, as soon as Kind really started investing in YouTube, it came out from the entire marketing mix analysis as the #1 return for the entire brand on total revenue. So that's in-store, e-commerce. So that was the other piece. And then, more recently, some of, and Max and Tiffany will speak to this much better than I can, is some of the sort of more quarterly in-store sales lift reports can be sort of really good touch points in between. So you have like immediate real-time feedback, campaign feedback that gives you really good sort of survey-based and directional data, and then like an annualized marketing mix analysis. And it's always great when the data all tells you the same thing, right? And so when you have all three of those touch points sort of pointing to success, then it's really easy to continue to invest, quite frankly.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
How'd I do, Max and Tiffany?
That was great.
Great to hear more about that mix of tactics as well as the measurement strategy there. Our next question is for Max. The audience member asks, for companies offering written recipe content on their websites, does it make sense to embed recipe or cooking videos on those pages, pack recipe information into YouTube videos, or a bit of both? Great question. Super specific, but I love the specificity of that.
Yeah, and I think that the answer is a bit of both. I think one thing that we were talking about, I think a little bit earlier, is you kind of get people to watching your YouTube videos that you own, you can retarget them. And then that's a really easy way to capture like high intent people that have already expressed some affinity towards your brand. And then you can go out and find them to convert via YouTube. And then there's also sort of just kind of YouTube SEO best practices where you want to link back, and you can tie that bridge as a high intent signal to Google search that this page is highly related to the kind of recipe content, then you are potentially going to increase your organic rankings. Same with the YouTube video itself. If you, in the title and in the description, have a lot of sort of relevant keywords, if somebody searches for, I don't know, air fryer recipes
sure.
with chicken or whatever, then if somebody searches for that in YouTube, and we know that that's rising, it might have a higher likelihood of showing up for that related query. And then, again, then you can retarget it. It's sort of more of a kind of full funnel YouTube strategy.
Love it. Yeah, great to hear more about how that can be a hybrid approach for any of our audience members in the recipe space. So great to hear more about that. Thank you, Max. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have today for questions. I would like to thank our speakers as well as our sponsor, Pixability. Some final reminders: make sure you check your email for a link to the on-demand recording later today. Feel free to reach out to Matt with any questions about the presentation. And again, big thank you to our speakers and our audience for bearing with our technical difficulties today. You were all rock stars for getting through. This was an awesome presentation. Thank you to everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing everyone at an upcoming Adweek webinar.